My name is James Calloway. I'm 38 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in a building where the elevator has been broken since February, and nobody seems to care enough to fix it except me. I fix it every few months, as a favor to Mrs. Okafor on the 4th floor, who has bad knees and calls me the quiet angel, even though I've asked her at least 9 times to just call me James. I'm an electrician. Not the kind you call for a loose outlet. The kind you call when a high-rise commercial building starts throwing error codes at 2 in the morning and nobody on the maintenance team can figure out why. I've been doing this for 11 years. Before that, I spent 2 years as an apprentice under my Uncle Ray, who taught me that electricity doesn't care who you are. It only cares whether you respect it. I've carried that lesson into everything I do. I don't own a sports car. I drive a 2017 Chevy Colorado with a scratch on the passenger door that I keep meaning to fix and never do. I don't wear a watch. My hands are always a little rough, a little stained, no matter how hard I scrub them. My mother used to say that was the mark of a man who actually shows up. I think about that a lot. The morning this story begins, I got a call at 6:42 a.m. from Peterson Electrical, the contracting firm I work with on commercial accounts. My dispatcher, Lou, sounded tired. "James, I need you on site at Calloway-Harte Capital, 34th floor. Their main distribution panel is throwing fault codes. Facility manager says it's been intermittent for 3 days, but now one of the conference room circuits is completely dead." I asked who authorized the work order. Lou paused. "The CEO signed off personally. Someone named Victoria Hart?" I'd heard the name. Everyone had. Victoria Hart, 41, founder of Calloway-Harte Capital, one of the 5 largest private equity firms on the East Coast. The kind of woman whose face appeared on magazine covers next to words like ruthless and visionary, depending on who was writing the story. I didn't read those magazines. I just grabbed my toolkit and drove downtown. The building was exactly what I expected. 40 floors of glass and steel, a lobby with ceilings so high they made you feel irrelevant, a security desk staffed by a man who looked at my work order like it personally offended him. He made me wait 11 minutes before calling upstairs. I stood there in my work boots and didn't say a word. I've learned that silence in those lobbies is its own kind of dignity. The facility manager, a nervous man named Gerald with a loosened tie, met me at the elevator bank on the 34th floor. He spoke fast and quietly, like someone who'd been managing anxiety for a long time. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Calloway. The panel is in the East Utility Corridor. I need to warn you, there's a board presentation happening today. Miss Hart asked that you be as discreet as possible." I said I always was. He nodded like he wasn't sure he believed me. The utility corridor was on the other side of a frosted glass partition that separated the service areas from the executive floor. I set down my bag, opened the panel, and started reading the fault codes. Whoever had last serviced this board had done a competent but careless job. 2 of the breakers were undersized for the load they were carrying, and a ground fault interrupter had been wired backward. Not dangerous yet, but the kind of mistake that becomes dangerous on a cold Tuesday in December when nobody's watching. I had been working for about 40 minutes when the frosted glass door opened. I didn't look up right away. I heard heels on the tile, the kind of sound that expects a room to respond to it. Then a voice, clear and precise, the kind of voice that had clearly given a lot of instructions and not taken many. "Gerald, why is there a technician in the executive corridor?" I stood up then. Not because she startled me, because it was the polite thing to do. She was taller than I expected, dark hair pulled back sharply, a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, the kind of posture that made everything else in the room look slightly unsteady by comparison. She looked at me the way some people look at furniture they didn't order. Curious, inconvenienced, ready to send it back. Gerald cleared his throat. "Ms. Hart, this is James Calloway from Peterson Electrical. He's here about the panel fault we reported on Monday." "I know what he's here for, Gerald." Her eyes moved to my tool bag on the floor, then to my hands, then back to my face. "I asked for discreet. There's a board meeting starting in 12 minutes. "I can step out," I said. "I'll need to come back to finish." She looked at me like that answer was almost acceptable. Almost. "How long will this take?" 3 hours to do it right. 40 minutes to do it in a way that will need redoing in 6 months. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, More like recalculation. Fine, 3 hours, but you stay in this corridor. My board does not need to see. She paused, her eyes dropping briefly to my work boots, to the faint grease mark on my forearm. This. I should have let it go. I've let things like that go hundreds of times. But something about the pause made me ask quietly, "What exactly is it they shouldn't see, Miss Harte?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Someone doing manual labor in an executive space." I nodded once. "Understood." She turned and walked back through the glass door. Gerald gave me an apologetic look. I went back to the panel. I finished in 2 hours and 45 minutes. I documented every fault, every correction, every component replaced, and left a 2-page written summary for Gerald with recommendations for a full load audit in the next quarter. I do that for every job. Not because anyone asks, because the next person who opens that panel deserves to know what they're looking at. I was packing my bag when the glass door opened again. This time there were more voices. The board meeting had ended early apparently, because 8 people in expensive suits were moving through the corridor toward the elevator bank. And Victoria Harte was walking at the front of the group, speaking to a heavy-set man in a navy jacket I would later learn was named Clifford Wren. He was loud in the way that men are loud when they want to make sure a room knows they're important. He saw me crouching over my tool bag and stopped walking. "Victoria!" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've got a maintenance guy blocking the corridor." "He's finishing up," she said, without looking back. "Finishing up," Wren repeated, the way some people repeat things to make them sound smaller. He walked closer, looked down at me, then at the open panel I hadn't yet closed. "You sure he fixed the right thing? Last time we had some guy in here, he made the problem worse." I looked up at him. The fault was a GFCI wired in reverse, and 2 breakers carrying loads they weren't rated for. I've corrected both and left documentation for your facility team. If you'd like, I can walk you through it. Wren laughed once, short and dismissive. He looked at Victoria. "He wants to walk us through it." He said it the way people say things they find ridiculous. "Listen, son, we don't need the tutorial. We just need the lights to work." I closed my tool bag, stood up, and looked at him evenly. "Then the lights will work." "Good." He straightened his jacket. "Because frankly, I don't know why we need a guy like you up here anyway. There's a whole service entrance for a reason." The corridor went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet, the kind where everyone decides at once to study the floor. I looked at Wren for a moment, then at Victoria. Her face was unreadable, but her jaw had tightened slightly. She said nothing. I picked up my bag. "Have a good afternoon." I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Behind me, I heard Wren's voice resume its regular volume, already moved on to something else. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. Victoria Harte stepped in after me. The doors closed. We stood on opposite sides of the elevator. I looked straight ahead. She did too for a moment, then turned slightly. "That was unnecessary," she said. Her voice was different than it had been in the corridor. Not softer exactly, more honest. "Which part?" I asked. She paused. "His part?" I nodded. The elevator descended. On the 28th floor, she spoke again. "I should have said something. It's your board." "That's not a good reason." I looked at her. She was looking at the elevator panel. Her arms were crossed, but not in the way people cross them to be defensive. More like she was holding something still. "Clifford Wren has been with this firm for 9 years, she said. "He's also been quietly undermining every decision I've made for the last 3 of them. He speaks to vendors, contractors, support staff, anyone he considers beneath the room, the way he spoke to you today. I've addressed it twice in private." She stopped. I should have addressed it out loud. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. She didn't move right away. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She finally looked at me directly. "Because you kept your dignity, and you didn't make me feel worse about mine. I thought that deserved honesty." I held the door open for a moment. The fault in that panel could have become a fire risk within the next 2 months. You might want to mention the load audit to someone who will actually schedule it. She looked at me. Then she took a card from the inside pocket of her jacket and held it out. "Send your full report directly to me." I took the card. We walked out of the building in opposite directions. I thought that was the end of it. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was an assistant calling from Calloway-Harte Capital, asking if I would be available to consult on a full electrical systems review for a building they were acquiring. Not a repair call, a consulting engagement. I said I'd have to check my schedule. That evening, I called Lou at the dispatch office. He told me Victoria Hart had requested me by name. I sat with that for a while. I showed up the following Monday. The acquisition property was a 7-story mixed-use building in the South End that had been sitting half-finished for 2 years. The kind of building that looks like someone had a vision and then ran out of either money or nerve. I walked through it alone for 4 hours, making notes, taking photos, testing every panel and junction box I could find. Victoria was there for the last hour. She walked with me without speaking for most of it, which surprised me. I had expected questions or directives. Instead, she just watched, and occasionally wrote something in a notebook she kept in her jacket pocket. At the end, we stood on the 6th floor, looking out through the unfinished windows at the city below. "What's your verdict?" she asked. "The bones are good. The electrical work was done by 2 different contractors with 2 different standards. Nothing catastrophic, but nothing I'd call complete either. You'd need to redo the 3rd floor entirely. The rest can be brought up to code with targeted work." "Estimated cost?" "Depends on who you hire and how fast you want it done. I can give you a range tonight if you need it." She looked at me. "You could have just said it's a mess and walked away." "It's not a mess. It's unfinished. There's a difference." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you always make those distinctions? When they matter?" She looked back out the window. "Clifford Wren resigned yesterday," she said. "Or was asked to, depending on who you talk to." I didn't say anything. "It wasn't because of what he said to you," she added quickly. "There were other things, significant other things. But that moment in the corridor was when I decided I was done waiting to address them. I hope it was the right call." She turned to look at me. "It was the honest one." We stood in the unfinished building for another few minutes. She pointed to a doorway where the rough framing was still exposed and asked if I knew what kind of wood that was. I told her Douglas fir. She said her grandfather had been a carpenter. I said my uncle had been an electrician. Neither of us said anything after that for a while. But it didn't feel like silence that needed filling. I submitted my report that night. She called me at 8:47 the following morning to ask one follow-up question about junction box clearance on the 3rd floor. Then she asked if I wanted coffee. I said I was already at a job site in Norwalk. She said, "Another time then." I said sure. I didn't know what any of it meant. I still don't, entirely. I'm not a man who builds stories in his head before they happen. I drive the same truck, I eat the same lunch, I fix the same kinds of problems that powerful people never notice until something stops working. That hasn't changed. But I think about what my mother used to say, that rough hands are the mark of a man who actually shows up. And I think about the woman who stepped into that elevator, not because she had to, but because something in her decided that honesty mattered more than the room's opinion of her. I walked away from that corridor with my dignity. She followed me with hers. That's the only kind of story I know how to tell. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. I read everyone. And if you know someone who works with their hands and never gets told their work matters, share this with them. They deserve to hear it. See you in the next one.